During the month of May, we observe Older Americans Month. During this month, we will celebrate the strength of older adults and allow them to have the joy of sharing their life stories with you. Today's interview is with Carol McLimans. I know her story will inspire you in being part of your own community of strength. I know her story has definitely inspired me. Wow, she is amazing. Hi, Carol.
Hello,
How are you today?
I'm good.
Well, we're going to do our exciting interview. I guess we'll start out with asking you where you were born.
Well, I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
And did you grow up there?
I did. I lived there in the same house until I graduated from high school.
And then what happened? What did you do after you graduated from high school?
I went to college. I went to the University of Minnesota, and that was quite a ways from home. The reason I went there was that I wanted to get as far, I wanted to get quite far from home. It was a big school, and the program that I wanted to take was not offered in South Dakota. I majored in what was then called medical technology, and today it's called clinical laboratory science. So that I had to go to the University of Minnesota for that. And it was a really big school, and I didn't know a soul there, but I went there because that's where I could major in lab science, and also because they had a wonderful indoor ice rink, and I was a figure skater, and so I could skate there in my spare time. We didn't have indoor ice rinks in South Dakota. I had to skate outside in the wintertime. So I actually won the South Dakota Women's Championship. One of my biggest thrills was I got to skate during the halftime, or whatever they call it, during a hockey break at the university. When they played, the University of Minnesota hockey team played the Olympic hockey team back in the 1950s. I don't know what year it was.
Wow.
1953 or 1954. And I didn't fall, and it was one of my best performances.
And where was that? Where did you do that?
That was when I went to school at the University of Minnesota. Their main campus was in Minneapolis.
Okay.
So I went to school, graduated, and then I just stayed on at the university hospitals. That was my first job right out of college. I had not worked, I worked selling fireworks at my father's gas station in the summer when I was, still in high school, but I hadn't had a job otherwise until I graduated from college, and I went to work right away in the microbiology lab at the university hospitals.
And the University Hospital, where was that located?
That was on part of the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis.
Okay.
So I had several, I worked there for several years, and I worked in some other hospitals. After I got married, we moved to a farm outside of Rochester, Minnesota. So I worked at a smaller lab there, and then I worked at the Mayo Clinic for nearly 20 years. In my last job at Mayo, I was the director of the clinical laboratory medicine program. It was a 2-year associate degree program. So I basically worked, I worked when women didn't work, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
I worked full-time starting in 1954, and I had to defend myself all the time because I was, working and the other mothers were staying home. So that was my first career, totally different than what I ended up doing later. I have 2 children. My son was killed in an auto crash a couple years ago. Well, actually, 2015. But I have a daughter and then a son. I have 3 grandchildren,
Wow.
and I have 5 great-grandchildren. My oldest granddaughter, my daughter's daughter, has 5 children, and they range in age from 2 to 8. Up until this last year, we had been meeting in Florida in the winter. They like to go to Florida and escape Minnesota snow, so we would spend, a week or usually a week to 10 days in Orlando, and then the kids love to swim, so we would drive from there to, the beach. So I miss seeing them. But the three oldest are boys. She had 3 boys, and then followed by 2 girls.
Well, how sweet.
That's a handful.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I decided I took an early retirement. So I took that early retirement option, and I stayed in Minnesota then for, must have been close to 2 years. And then I took a winter vacation. I took a cruise with some friends and came back to Minnesota to a terrible blizzard. And I said, what am I doing in Minnesota in the wintertime? And decided that I wanted to move, go someplace. I had no idea where that would be. So I started looking at magazines, places to retire. I was looking for 4 seasons and not too much snow, and that pretty much left Asheville as the choice. So I put my house on the market. It actually sold before I had purchased anything here even, and not been to Asheville before, but I took a plane. I also really love the ocean, and I was torn between the mountains and the coast, but being born and bred as a landlocked Midwesterner, I knew nothing about hurricanes, and that kind of scared me away from the coast. Basically, I ended up in Asheville. I looked in Charlottesville, Virginia. I met a realtor. I flew down here and had 3 days to find a place. And I looked in Charlotte because I thought Asheville might be too small. I looked at Charlottesville on the coast. I looked at Carolina Beach, and I looked at Asheville. And so in the 3 days I was here, I purchased my home. It was just plot out at the time, and picked out everything that was going to go into it, and went home. And then I didn't have any place to live for a couple, 2-3 months.
Where did you live?
Well, I moved in. Some people from our church had a spare bedroom, a nice basement area, and bath down there, and so they took me in for over a month. But then it was going to be 3 months until my home was built, so I just decided I would make an adventure out of it, and I traveled. I bought a minivan and a tent, and I spent 3 months on the road. I went up through Canada, crossed all of eastern Canada, went up to Newfoundland, drove down the east coast, and then I got here to Asheville, and I quit my traveling. And then I rented a motorhome and stayed in that, and then I rented an apartment until my home was completed.
Oh my goodness.
So that was my big adventure, being on the road months. I was 60, and I had really never camped before. So here I am with a tent and by myself, just going across the country.
And you did that when you were 60?
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't have a lot of bills to pay. At that time, I had sold my house. It was just an adventure. That trip could not be repeated today, and I am so thankful I did it when I did, because today we have GPS. Today I don't take a map to get any place,
Right.
Basically, I do everything with my navigation on my car, for everything.
Oh,
I didn't have that. I had a cell phone, which was over 50 cents a minute, and so what I would do is I would tell the kids I'm only going to have the cell phone on for a certain amount of time, and call me, and then I would go to a payphone and call them because it was cheaper. We don't even have payphones anymore.
I know. Well, what did they think about your adventure?
My kids, my son was always saying, because I would call and leave voicemail messages, and he would say, keep that message. It might be the last time we hear from her.
Oh, that is pretty amazing. That really is. And so you didn't know anyone when you came to Asheville, right?
No, I didn't.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't know anyone. I met a person the first night I stayed at the Motel 6 off of Tunnel Road, and there was an RV park there, and the receptionist there was renting an RV down at the RV park. And so that's how I ended up. The RV park is gone now, but it was on Tunnel Road. It was called Taps, and that's where I stayed when I first came here. And so I met people. We had a really fun, close group of people that lived in the RV park. It's now gone, but it was been there up until the last few years. And we had a really good group of people, and I could explore and do a lot. So for about a year, I was a nomad, and then I got bored, and so I looked for some volunteer work. And in the meantime, I had gone to graduate school and gotten a master's degree in counseling and psychological services because, and this was before people had encore careers. I didn't even know there was such a thing. But I believe I was 60.
Where did you get your master's degree?
Minneapolis. It was St. Thomas College when I went. It's now called St. Thomas University. But they had a graduate program that I was able to complete in Rochester. I had done some volunteer work at a crisis line, at a victims' rape crisis line, and that sparked an interest in social science, and I wanted to go to school and become a social science major, but there were no master's programs, so I got sort of shifted into this master's in counseling program at St. Mary's University, and it was a Catholic school, but they had a wonderful counseling program in psychology, and you were able to take the exam of the only college in the country that allowed you to take the exam for the practice of professional psychology, which put you at this, otherwise you have to have a PhD to take it. So I did take that, and I passed it by 1 point.
Wow.
After I came down here, I'd had an interest. I had a part-time job for a while with a county, Olmsted County in Rochester, Minnesota. After I retired from Mayo, I had this wonderful experience of being someone, 60, trying to find a job. So I know what that's like when you're overqualified,
Yeah.
Couldn't get anything. I finally worked in a bridal store. Then I got this part-time job with the county social services in what they called program evaluation and planning, and I did a lot of work on measurement and evaluation. And so after I came here, I guess a church friend who was working or volunteering at Land of Sky, and I decided that, maybe that would be a place that I would like to volunteer. So I did some volunteer work there, working with them on objectives and measurement, and that's how I ended up at Land of Sky, first as a volunteer, and then they got some grant funding for a position called a job developer. I was hired for that job. It was a part-time, 6-month grant-funded job at the time, but it lasted for a number of years, and I just ended up spending almost 20 years at Land of Sky. Certainly when I went to work there, I never thought I was going to be there for almost 20 years.
I wanted to ask you another thing about, you appear to be in very good health, and what do you relate that to? Is it your eating habits or your exercise, or what do you do that makes you so healthy?
I do exercise a lot. It's probably not my eating habits for sure, but I don't eat a lot of junk food now. So I try to be more careful now. I had been going to the Y. We have the Ferguson family Y, and I was at the Y at least 2 hours a day, 7 days a week, pre-COVID. But, of course, I've not been to the Y since. And so I have my own kind of little gym. I do work out. I work out an hour a day, 7 days a week. I do, I have a total gym. I have a little treadmill. I have a exercise bike. I have a weight bench. I'll tell you what I'm seriously thinking, but I haven't quite done it. I used to bike a lot. In Minnesota, it's a lot easier to a 20-mile bike trail, whether I'm going to buy a bike or not. But I might be buying myself a new bike. I've been online, and it says you're never too old to ride a bike.
Well, you're about to prove that, aren't you?
Got to get over this fear of falling off a bike, you know. Really, for me here is that I have to haul any place. Even I could be getting the bike on, putting something on the car and hauling it. So those are things, you know. Yeah, I like to canoe. I like to sail. Before I moved down here, I had a condo on a little lake, kind of like Biltmore Lake, and so I had a canoe and a tiny little sailboat. You know, kayaks have just become popular, you know, more in the last 20 years. So, but I like to kayak and I love the paddleboard, and I was amazed at how easy that was.
Well, you are talking about things that young people do. Do you mind saying how old you are?
I just had a birthday, March 1st, 85.
I'm just blown away by all of these things, these activities that you are still doing.
I just believe that, you know, and I realize that I am blessed, you know, health-wise. I mean, I know, and I am so grateful for that. I'll tell you, Nathan Ramsey used to kid me all the time at Land of Sky about rollerblading, because there was a big article in the Citizen Times. This has been when I first came here. I was like 60. They did an article on active older adults. So the Citizen Times photographer met me down at the dog park, and so I was featured in this article, rollerblading, when I was in my 60s. And I don't know where Nathan learned about that or saw the article, but he used to just, you know, quite often he would comment about that. Still rollerblading. I still have my rollerblades. And I thought, well, you know, maybe for a change, I might just put my rollerblades on and go down and rollerblade around the tennis court.
You might get another article written about you if you did that.
And for that, I do wear a helmet and wrist guards and knee pads.
Well, good. I bet, oh my goodness, what a picture that would make. Well, you are amazing. I'm encouraged. My mind is thinking, okay, what can I do now? Certainly not all
like
that.
I really am toying with this. I'm surprised I didn't give my rollerblades to the Goodwill, but I know they're out in my garage here, on my carport.
And I think a lot of people are going to be shocked at what they find out you can do.
Okay. Well, thank you for all of your help, and I bet you had way more information than you ever wanted. Just ask me a question and I can go on forever.
Well, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. These interviews wouldn't be very easy to make if people didn't talk. So,
okay. Oh, good. I'm glad I'm the only one that talks.
Okay. Bye, Carol.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.